This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we are doing a walkthrough training of the Veda system for the Early School Leaver program. So if you didn't know, Veda actually stands for the Virtual ESLTP Data Application. And yes, I did put an acronym inside of an acronym, but we're going to walk through just, from the very beginning, how you access the database. So what you can see on the screen, hopefully you can see on the screen, this is the Early School Leaver webpage. So this is ESLTPillinois.com. And on here, you'll find a bunch of different things. You have an upcoming professional development tab, resources. If you scroll down, you have all of the colleges that have programs, and when you click on those, it'll take you to the Early School Leaver page for that college, but we're not going to go too in-depth into the website. So up here, this database portal button is what we're looking at. So when you click on that, it will take you to what we refer to as Veda. So you can either access it by using the ESLTP website and clicking on that database portal button, or if you favorite this to your toolbar or your favorites, it'll keep it up so you can pull it up that way as well. So this should be what it looks like when you first log in. As you can see, my information is already saved in here because if I don't do that, I forget my login information. So when you first gain access to Veda, you will put in your email address where it asks for your email address. And then when I enter you into the system, it generates a very generic password. And so in order to update that password, or if you ever are like me and forget your password, there is a lost password button right down there that you'll click and then follow through that process. I'm not going to take you through that process today, but if you ever have any questions, if you're having issues logging in, if you've forgotten your password, if it's the first time you're logging in, this is where you want to go. And if you have any problems with it, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. So when you log in, you put your email address, your password. Always make sure to hit this "I'm not a robot" button, because if you don't, it'll just kick you back and it won't log in. And then log in. So when I log in, you'll see my screen will look a lot different than the rest of yours. Typically, when you log in, you will only see your program. But I am what is referred to as a super user. So I have access to everyone's programs. So we'll walk you through here just quickly on this page. So you'll see you have this little red X. Now everything in Veda is set up with sort of a fail-safe. So this, if I wanted to delete a site, this little red X here, if I wanted to delete this site, I could click on it, but it pops up with, this record will be permanently deleted and this action cannot be undone. Dun, dun, dun. So you say cancel because you don't want to delete that. But if for whatever reason you wanted to delete something, that's what this little red X is for. And then the gears, if you click on that, it will take you to, so this will be your site information. So you'll have your name, phone number, address of the program if you want to, city, state, and all of that is to your discretion if you want to put that on there. And again, when you're on this, you can access your students page here. You can access your reports page, and then manage users you won't have unless you are an administrator to your specific program site. Okay, and so another great thing about Veda is that there are multiple ways to access information. So if you ever find yourself on a page and you're not really sure how you got there, what it is, there's always multiple ways to access the different pages. So this is the Students tab. And on here, you'll see I only have 2 because this is just our test site. But on here, you'll have all of your students that you have entered into Veda. You will have these little feeder bars so WLB is that work-based learning. And then CADI is that, I'm blanking on what CADI is. Career Awareness and Development Instruction, those little feeder bars on there as well. You'll have your status, which can either be active, completed, inactive, and now we have pre-eligible, which I'll get into that a little later. And then your date will be the date that they enrolled into the program. So the date that they met all of the requirements in order to be eligible for the program and enrolled into the program. And then you'll also see for each student section, they have again another work-based learning area, CADI, and follow-ups. And like I said, multiple areas of where you can get to stuff. So again, we have work-based learning up here, reports up here. So we will go ahead, click on Mic Demo here. Do we have any questions up to this point?
Yeah, and it's not a question, but just a point of clarification. This is Jane. Where you say date eligible, that's the date they actually become eligible for receiving ESLTP funds, correct?
Yes, so that is the date that they are eligible. So they've met I shouldn't say the date that they are eligible. They have met the eligibility requirements and they have enrolled into the early school leaver program. Does that clarify or does that make it muddier? Okay, I'm going to assume that silence means it clarifies it. All right, so we will continue on. Okay, so this is Mic Demo's student information page. So when you walk through here, you'll see, so up here he has a work-based learning activity that occurred on 5/22. It was a job shadow. So any work-based learning events that you have for this student will show up on the first half of this page. And then when you move down here, you have CADI. So when you have a student that has met the eligibility requirements, has been enrolled into the program, and is active within Veda, it is assumed at this point, because there is no other way of marking it in Veda at the moment, that they are also enrolled in CADI. So they are receiving that 200 minutes per week of that classroom or individual instruction. Now these little radio buttons here, so you'll see it says plan and portfolio. So this is the transition plan and the transition portfolio. Now, if you have your early school leaver manual or have seen it at some point or have accessed it online, which sidebar, that is in the process of being updated as well. But you'll notice that these little markers in here are listed out as things that are to be looked for and communicated with the student as they are going through the early school leaver program. So as we all know, the point of the early school leaver program is to get these students either their high school diploma or their HSE and to transition them on to something else, whether that is employment, whether that is furthering their post-secondary education, military, whatever the case may be. And so that's where this comes into play, these little radio buttons. And when you click on these, that activates those little reader bars that we saw on that first page. And then you have the ability to put notes. So let's say Mike is planning to attend ISU. And those are more sort of case notes for your own personal use, to keep track of conversations that you've had with students, what their plan was, if it's changing, because we all know sometimes plans change with our students. Program they will apply to if they have one in mind, when and how they plan to apply, you know, talking about the amount of time that needs to be spent within that program, the cost, really going into those in-depth conversations of, okay, so this is your plan, this is what your goal is, how do we get there? And then over here is a transition portfolio. And that can be, you know, however your program puts that together, whether it's a binder, whether it's, you know, a database online that has all of that information in there, however you guys organize that. But that looks at, you know, their resume, cover letter, any letters of recommendations, test scores, transcripts, all of those items that they would need if they are planning to enter into employment or further their education. Okay, so go down a little bit further to program information. So program information has your enrollment date. And again, that is the enrollment date is the date that they have met all of the eligibility requirements, which is that age requirement and those TABE or CASAs or grade level equivalency scores. And then you have your status. So active is a student who meets the eligibility requirements, is enrolled in the program, and is currently participating in the program. So they're attending CADI, they're doing some of their work-based learning, they are an active participant within the program. Completed are those individuals who have, excuse me, again, they've met all of the eligibility requirements, they were enrolled in the program, they have done their work-based learning, they have done CADI, they have obtained their high school equivalency or gotten their high school diploma, and they have, in every sense of the word, completed the early school leaver program. Inactive is for students who were enrolled in the program but have stepped out for whatever reason. They have either decided that they are done with the program and no longer want to move forward. They stepped out because, because we found ourselves in the middle of a pandemic and they didn't have childcare. So they had, you know, to be a full-time stay-at-home parent and weren't able to continue on with the program. And again, inactive students can always be moved back to active, but an inactive student is a student that is not currently, for whatever reason, participating in the program. Okay, so the new tab that we have is this pre-eligible tab. So through conversations with a lot of the programs, we were able to add a pre-eligible tab for those students who do not meet that testing requirement. Now you will find when you hit that pre-eligible tab and enter in student information, there still is a specified age range for these students. because we still are looking at those 16 to 24-year-old aged students. But if they have not met those TABE or CASA's test scores, this is where you will put them. You will mark them as pre-eligible because those are the students that are close, and we want to keep an eye on them, and we want to be able to still have conversations with them. And then once they meet that test score, we want to move them over to that active. And this way, all of their information will still already be in Veda. You won't have to go through and re-enter. You'll just pop them over to active, type in that enrollment date, and they're good to go. So any questions on the status, that pre-eligible, any questions on that? Okay, then I am going to keep trucking along. And again, feel free to unmute yourself. You know, if it's Brittany, you're going too fast. Brittany, you're not giving enough information. Let me know. And this status bar is very important because so ICCB uses Veda. Jane in particularly is also a super user as well. So she can go in and look at all of the programs. And this is how she determines who the students are that are participating. If with this pre-eligible tab, it's extremely important because it shows her that this particular student is on our quote unquote watch list to get into the program, but because they aren't meeting those eligibility requirements just yet, funds are not being used to provide services to that particular student. Hopefully I'm making sense and making things clear and not confusing anybody. All right, and then down here it's just a little notes section, and that is, you know, for whatever really you want it to be. If there's particular information that, you know, needs to be known about the student, if there was a conversation that was had, any sort of case noting or information extra that maybe isn't asked for on this page can go in there as well. All right, so down here, general information, you'll have your site information that goes in there. So whether it's Blackhawk, Joliet, whatever the site may be. And then you will get a unique ID. So as you can see, it says this student is being assigned a unique ID. Only fill in this field if you want to override with a custom unique ID. And so again, that can be whatever you want it to be. You can have it be a generalized populated ID. You could have it be their school ID. If you want it to be their social security number, you can, but that's not really necessary for Veda. So again, school ID or that generalized ID might be best. So you have first and last name, date of birth, and again, this has that age range in there that will catch you if, you know, I don't know anybody that's trying to enroll 15-year-olds in the program, but if you have a student that's close to turning 24 or has already turned 24, that'll catch you there. Former last name, if they have it, gender, race, English is not first language. And then here you'll have if they're co-enrolled in another program. And this is a way, as you can see down here too, utilizing braided funding. So this information right here, again, all of this information is to keep the programs organized with the students that they are serving and have all of the information that they need, but it's also a way to provide that information to ICCB as well, to make sure that, you know, the I's are being dotted and the T's are being crossed and everything is being met and cohesive. And so this utilizing braided funding is actually new. We had that added in there just so, again, we can know that this student is also using other grant funds. And so you can list your sources in there, whether it's adult education, whether it's WIOA, whatever the case may be for that. And then down here is contact information for the student, address, email, cell phone. Those are all, as you can see. So those little red asterisks, probably should have said that sooner. Those little red asterisks means that that's information that needs to be inputted, or it'll pop back and say, oh, you're missing an email, you're missing a cell phone. So that is contact information for your student. Emergency contact, if they choose to put one in there. And then down here, so under this history tab, we have employment status, last school type, so whether they were at a public high school, private, homeschooled, last grade that this particular student has completed, and then whether or not they have their HSE or high school diploma, and if they are being enrolled into an early school leaver program, they should not have their HSE or high school diploma. And if they do, they have to be showing a skills deficiency in some way. And I feel like I'm going to say that and I'm going to confuse people. So I'm going to pause for a second, see if we have any questions, any comments, going too fast, too slow.
There's no questions in the chat right now, Brittany.
Okay. Either I'm doing an awesome job or you guys just haven't had enough coffee this morning. I don't know. All right. So assessment scores. And again, this is something that has been updated. So TABE scores, the reading and math, that's always been there. We have now added CASA's reading and math because that is also an acceptable test to determine eligibility. And we have also included the grade level equivalency because we do have some programs who students come to the early school leaver program from alternative ed high school, and so they don't necessarily have that TABE or CASA score, but they do have a grade level equivalency that qualifies them to be in the early school leaver program. So now, as you can see here, these assessment scores do not have red asterisks by them because you can do one or the other. And so I didn't want to make any of them necessary in order to move on with completing this information because you don't need all of them, you just need one of them. But please, please note that this is information that needs to be entered into Veda because this determines whether the students being served are eligible early school leaver students to be receiving those funds. So always make sure that that information is being put in there. Okay, and then we have other information. So this opportunities for greater assistance, these are those areas in the career and technical education world, we call them our special populations, or just areas where students may need additional supports or services. So you can see individuals with disabilities, low income individuals, ex-offenders, just, you know, Again, this is information that needs to be disclosed by the student. As you can see, it doesn't have a red asterisk on there, so it doesn't need to be filled in order to move past this page. But it is information that is important and can help programs provide additional services to that particular student to help overcome any of those additional hurdles or barriers that they may face because of those. And then you have your career interest areas as well. Okay, and then workforce training on or before entry date, if they had received any other training before they had come into the program, yes or no. If you hit yes, you can type in there what it is, and it gives you some examples of what that could possibly be.
Brittany.
Yes.
Brittany, I've noticed on the chat there was a couple questions about basic skills deficiency, and there's one about needing more information about the grade level equivalency. So like I said, before you move on to another subject, there were a couple questions that came in on stuff you were just talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what would be considered a skilled deficiency? So if you have a student now, and Jane, please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a conversation that had occurred with Kathy at one point. If you have a student who, especially a student who is in the program and has obtained their high school equivalency, but is still, I don't want to say lacking because I'm not a fan of that term, but for lack of a better term, that is lacking in certain skills, you can still provide services to that student even though they have obtained their high school equivalency.
That is exactly right. Like I said, a basic skills deficiency is 8th grade or below. So 8th grade, you've got to be 8th grade to be in the ESLTP program. But so 8th grade, even if they would have a high school diploma, if they still test at 8th grade, they are still lacking basic skills and therefore eligible for service.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully that has clarified. If not, let me know. But in the meantime, I will move on to, okay, so please explain more about how we would get a student with a GLE, but we would not then need to give them a CASA's goals assessment. So for that, and again, Jane, jump in if I'm speaking out of turn here. For the grade level equivalency, if you have a student that is coming to you that is currently enrolled in an alternative ed program, they will have that grade level equivalency. And if it meets that requirement, if it's that 8th grade level, you can enroll them into the early school leaver program. Now, throughout the early school leaver program, you should be reassessing. You should be, whether it's the TABE or CASAs, you should have eventually those TABE or CASAs scores because you are doing assessments throughout the program. And most of the time, and maybe I'm incorrect, but most of the time the students that we see coming into the early school leaver program have left their high school for whatever reason. But we do have some programs who work with alternative education high schools that have those students that are enrolled and are choosing to join the early school leaver program as well. Hopefully that's clarified.
And to add just a little bit, you mentioned something as they're doing their follow-up assessments, for those students that have a high school diploma but are still considered basic skills deficient, if you test them and they test 9th grade or above, they are now no longer eligible to get ESLTP funds because they've got the high school equivalency already. and they are no longer basic skills deficient. So for those students, there was just a very small window of opportunity for service.
Okay, we had one more question come through. So workforce training means work experience through the LWIP. What about through other training, Job Corps, etc.? So yes, that workforce training, while workforce training, quote unquote, is defined, through the LWIP, that workforce training, if you have other experiences, training, so on and so forth that you want to put in there, by all means, feel free to enter that in there. And I do want to note, so if there are items that don't, other than the assessment scores, let me be very clear. If there are items other than the assessment scores that do not have an asterisk by them, it's really just meant for program usage. So it is information for you, for instructors, to have and to have access to in order to better serve that student. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions pop through here, so I will continue on. All right, and then the last little bit is this follow-up. So when you have, now, and this can be used however the programs choose to use it, whether you have a student who has enrolled in the program, has been active, and then has kind of fallen off the face of the earth for whatever reason. If you want to put in that, you've sent them an email, you've called them on the phone, you happen to run into them, on campus and said, hey, we haven't heard from you, whatever the case may be, you can put that in there. When you have students that complete the early school leaver program, and we do ask that you make attempts to follow up with them after they have completed the program, to discuss, how that transition has gone. Have they found employment, full-time employment? Have they entered into another training or post-secondary institution? Have they gone into the military? Where are they at currently, and how has this program assisted them into meeting those goals? And so that all goes here, and I will go into more detail as to how that's entered in there. But I really just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the student page looks like. And then down here, if you make any updates, make any changes, you'll just hit that update button and it will save all of that information. So we will scroll back up here and we will talk about work-based learning and how to enter in that information. So again, as I had mentioned with Veda, there is multiple routes that you can take to entering in a work-based learning experience. So if you have a work-based learning opportunity that is only for one particular student, you can hop on their page. So we're on Mike Demo's page, come to this work-based learning area and this green plus add new button, hit that. And so you'll see new WLB, which is work-based learning. So you'll have your site, your student, which this should be automatically populated if you're going in through the student's page. The date that it took place, the hours that this student spent during this particular work-based learning opportunity, and then the description, whether it was their current paid employment job, an internship, job shadow, or other, and you can type that in here. Now again, this is not an exhaustive list, and especially with the current state that we find ourselves in, with, the pandemic, and kind of not really sure what these next couple of semesters are going to look like, please always feel free to either reach out to myself or Jane to discuss those work-based learning experiences and how they may shift and change if we continue on this virtual platform, and what's acceptable, what's not. So you'll put in description there, and then if you have, if you have the partner details, so if it is an employer, if you had someone come in and speak to the class, if you had them do a facility tour, you could put that information here. Now, as you can see, there's not a red asterisk, so it's not required, but if you have that information in order to keep everything up to date and aligned, so we know what exactly was going on, that information can go in there. Any questions about entering in work-based learning?
Brittany, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
As it relates to that date, if I'm trying to put the person in a different quarter other than the quarter that I'm presently working in, I think I ran into some issues trying to do that. And that might be on the other screen, but if I'm trying to put a student's activities, say 2 quarters back, but I use the date of today's date where it says date on the work-based learning screen, what happens?
That I don't know. I can honestly say that I have not attempted to do that. So, okay, so what you're saying is, say we're in Q2 and you're putting in information that happened in the first quarter?
Right.
Okay. I think it should still let you, but I'll be completely honest, I haven't messed with that to see if there's any sort of catches in there that would not allow you to do that.
I actually ran into the problem, and I just wasn't sure if it was just me. But going forward, I won't run into the problem because I'm just going to start. What I would normally do is wait until the students meet certain guidelines before I go back and try and put them in. Usually until they've completed, to be honest with you, and I would cherry pick the students who did everything that they were supposed to do. And so when I went back this time to try to do it, I ran into some problems with the quarters. Going forward, I won't, because I see that that could be a big issue if I'm trying to put in someone's work, two quarters back. I see that's just making a lot of double work for me. I'm seeing now, instead of just doing it, especially since you guys have added that new tab where a
Right.
person, right. So going forward, I won't run into that problem, but I did run into it this time when I was trying to go back and put my students in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if there's ever any time where you're, excuse me, experiencing any difficulties with Veda, let me know. Again, she's still new, so we're still trying to work out some kinks here and there. But I will say, yes, please be sure to, I know some of you who have been with the early school leaver programs for a while have experienced IRIS and are a little hesitant to fully trust in this data program, and I completely understand that. IRIS, for those of you who are not familiar, was the old data system that we used for early school leaver, and to be brutally honest, it was awful. And it lost information, and it was not a good system for our programs to use. I have full trust in this Veda application. We have a great tech team behind it. So absolutely, please enter all of the information in here that you can in a timely fashion as well, because I know Jane especially goes in and that's how she does her monitoring, especially now with everything sort of being virtual and travel restrictions. She really uses Veda as a way to make sure that that those compliance are being met. Okay, I was just checking the chat there to see if we had any other questions. All right, so that is how you will enter work-based learning for an individual student. Now, if we go to this work-based learning tab up here, and then this is work-based learning for site. So this will have, you'll see here, right now it only has the one because I only have the one student, but for your programs, any work-based learning activity that you have entered will populate on this page. And so the nice thing about Veda, we can go to this add new here. So when you're on this work-based learning for site, you can add in a work-based learning experience for that entire classroom. So if you are keeping your student information up to date and you are keeping the status of each of the students up to date, so that active, inactive, completed, and pre-eligible, if you click on this, now obviously you see all of the other sites, but this, you can create a group work-based learning experience for those active students. So like I had mentioned earlier, if you have someone coming in to speak to the class, if you're doing a facility tour of a local area manufacturer, factory, or whatever the case may be for the classroom, you can enter that in as a site work-based learning experience. And then that way you don't have to go through and do each individual student. And it's the same information as was on the students page. Or, and again, like I said, there's multiple ways of doing things here on Veda. Or if you want to put, so let's say Mike Tester was absent that day. So you can go through and either click name and click all of the students, or unclick that and say, you know what, Mike Tester was absent, so it was only Mike demo, hit submit, and then that work-based learning experience will go into Mike Demo's information. Any questions on that? All right, then we will keep moving right along. So we will go to the reports page. Now, one thing about Veda, at this particular time, sorry, excuse me, at this particular time, this Veda does not generate an Excel file report. I am working with Mavidia. Mavidia is the IT tech team that created this behind Veda. I am working with them to see what our options are in order for a report to be generated that you can then, you know, generate through Veda, double check, obviously, because again, technology is great, but we can't fully 100% trust it, and then send that along to ICCB as your quarterly and final reports. That is in the works. That is not something that we have at the moment, but we are working on that. So this reports page. So let's go to, I don't know what I have information entered in for these quarters though. So as you can see here, we break it down into quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. And as you can see, as I hit those, these dates will change. And you can also go in there and type in the dates if you want to. So like the final report, if you want to go all the way back and type that in there. And this information on this page is populated from the information that is entered onto the student information page. So for example, gender, age, ethnicity, all of that information is asked on that student information page. The career areas of interest, that is one on the information, the student info page that does not have an asterisk by it, but for this reports page, that is where it is populated from. And then down here, and as you can see, I have 2 students and they're not very active students, so I don't have a lot of information on this page. But this all comes from the information that is put into Veda, how students are classified, the information that is put in that work-based learning tab, the information that is put in the CADI section of whether they've, if they've hit all of those markers on that transition plan or the transition portfolio. That's where all of this information comes from. Now, if you pull up this page and you are just like, this is completely incorrect, none of this information is populating the way it should, please, please, please let me know. Like I said, Veda is still fairly new, and so we are working out some kinks and some errors that have popped up. So if there are ever any issues, please let me know. But as you can see, all of these, well, they're not really questions, but all of these statements here come from the quarterly reports that ICCB asks the programs to complete. And so that's what all of that is based on. Okay, so that is our reports page. Trying to see if there is anything else that I missed. So these little toolbars, activity bars, I don't know what the technical term is for those, but so you'll see you have them for work-based learning and you have them for CADI. So right now, Mike Demo is just crushing it on the work-based learning experiences. He has 50 out of those 15 hours a semester. Mike Tester is lacking behind a little bit, but that's what that 15 is. That 15 is those 15 hours a semester for that work-based learning. And then for CADI, you have your plan and your portfolio, and when you go to the CADI page, you'll see that you have those 6 areas of, the type of program, how they will apply. That's where this comes from. That's how that gets filled. Or for that portfolio, the resume, recommendation letters, that's how this gets filled. And so this, up here you also have this filter by, so you can filter by active students, completed students, inactive students, pre-eligible students. Let's see again, work-based learning CADI follow-ups if you want to go to those particular sections for an individual student, that's where you will find those. All right, so I think I covered everything. Please let me know if there was something that I missed, if there's a question that was not answered. So yes, okay, so Donna, I do not see the report tab. Do I need a different type of login? So yes, I believe that report tab, let me double check on that, because so we do have different categories. We have site administrators, we have site users, And then we also have read only. And so those individuals, you know, can't enter in information, can't delete information. But Donna, I will make note of that, and I will follow up and see, you know, what the access is that you were given and if that needs to be changed.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a question concerning the alternative students. Um,
Oh.
you mentioned earlier um, concerning the eighth graders. I'm new. I haven't even, as soon as I got hired, maybe 2 months in, COVID hit. So I'm still,
You're
thanks. So I'm still learning a lot about this. I'm glad you mentioned Nevada was actually still new. So I guess I'm learning as others are learning. But one thing I was noticing, some of the eighth grade, their ages, and you mentioned about who would get those services. So we are following in the alternative schools the recommendations that that school has for that particular student, right? For them being eligible for ESLTP, correct?
So you will still need to follow the age requirements.
Okay.
So that 16 to 24
Okay.
For the early school leaver program.
Uh, but for those students, you said that will still be able to get the services even if um, they are deficient in those areas. But um, I'm trying to really remember how you worded it as it relates to those eighth graders who can still get the
Right.
services.
So if you have a student that falls within that 16 to 24-year-old age range, but has obtained their high school equivalency or has obtained their high school diploma, technically, when they obtain their high school equivalency or high school diploma, that's the goal of the early school leaver program. So that quote unquote goal has technically been met. However, if they are still falling within that, below that grade level equivalency, which currently right now for early school leaver, it's that 8th grade level. If
Right.
they're falling below that, they are what is considered skills deficient. And so then therefore can still receive additional services.
Okay. That
Did
appreciate
I
you. Thank
explain
you.
that correctly?
Yes, you said that correctly. But then if they would be subsequently tested, then and they would test at a ninth grade level, then they would cease eligibility once they do test that they are no longer basic skills deficient.
Correct. Because I think you mentioned that earlier. Correct. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You're thinking correctly. You know
Okay.
what you're doing. You may be new, but you have a clue.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right, any other questions, concerns, any items I didn't cover that you were hoping I would cover? And I will say, if you have individuals that are new to the early school leaver program and they need, or if you just have anybody that needs access to Veda, please send me an email with their name, their email address, and the type of access you would like them to have. So if you're a site administrator, you see everything. You have access to everything within that program. If you are a user, I believe you have the access to entering in student information and changing student information, but I'm thinking that reports page may be the thing that you don't have access to, and then you can have just a read only. So if you have someone who just needs to come in there and maybe get additional information on a student, they can come in there and see that, but they can't delete or add any information. So name, email address, type of user you want them to be, send that information to me, and I'll get that process started and get them entered in there so that they can start using this wonderful database. All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any other questions or comments, I'll go ahead and let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. As always, I am a phone call or email away. Currently, I am in between working on campus and working from home, so email is usually the best way to get a hold of me. But, you know, if you have any questions, concerns, reach out to me and I will do my best to assist you in any way that I can. So thank you guys for participating. I hope this was helpful. I hope this answered your questions. I will have this recording posted to the Early School Leaver website for you guys to access at a later time if you would like. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job.